Before we dive in, viewer discretion is advised. This content is for entertainment purposes.
It looked like a routine interview, until one unexpected question turned the entire studio ice cold in seconds. What happens when one of Hollywood's most physically imposing stars sits across from a former federal prosecutor on live television, and neither of them is willing to back down? The lights inside the View studio felt hotter than usual that morning. The applause was loud, the kind that rolls like thunder across polished floors and glossy coffee mugs. Vin Diesel walked out with his signature slow stride, measured, powerful, controlled. The kind of walk that says he owns every room he enters. Dressed in a charcoal blazer that barely concealed his broad frame, he gave the audience that half-smile, half-smirk fans know so well. Whoopi Goldberg greeted him first. Vin Diesel in the house, she announced, her voice carrying that familiar warmth. The crowd roared louder. Joy Behar leaned forward, eyeing him with playful skepticism. You look like you could bench press this entire table. Vin chuckled. Only if it's part of the script, he replied smoothly. Sunny Hostin watched quietly at first. Observant. Analytical. Her hands folded neatly on the table, her expression poised but calculating. She had a way of listening that made guests feel like they were being cross-examined, even when she wasn't speaking. The conversation started lightly. New movie promotions, the legacy of Fast and Furious, the loyalty of fans. Vin spoke about family, about brotherhood, about how the franchise meant more to him than box office numbers. His voice was steady, deep, deliberate. It's about loyalty, he said, glancing toward the audience. About standing by the people you love, even when the world questions you. There was applause. Nods. Even Sarah Haynes smiled warmly. But Sunny tilted her head slightly. Loyalty, she repeated. That's an interesting word. Vin turned toward her, still calm. Why's that? She offered a tight smile. Because sometimes loyalty can look like silence. Or avoidance. The energy shifted, subtle at first. The kind of shift you don't see but feel. Like the air pressure changing before a storm. Vin's jaw tightened just slightly. Avoidance of what? Sunny didn't blink. Of accountability. The audience murmured. Whoopi shifted in her chair. Joy raised her eyebrows, sensing the pivot. Sunny continued, her tone measured but firm. You've spoken passionately about family and loyalty. But critics have said that in moments of controversy within your projects, conflicts on set, public disputes, you've chosen to stay quiet rather than address things directly. Do you think that's fair? There it was. The spark. Vin leaned back, folding his hands together. His voice dropped half an octave. I don't engage in gossip. Sunny didn't retreat. Is it gossip when it's public record? A few audible oohs rippled through the audience. Whoopi jumped in gently. All right, let's not. But Vin was already leaning forward now, elbows on the table. I've built my career on respect, he said, the calmness thinning. I don't owe the world commentary on every rumor. Sunny's eyes narrowed slightly. Rumor and pattern aren't the same thing. Joy let out a quiet laugh of disbelief. Oh boy. The cameras zoomed in. You could almost hear the producers whispering in the control room. Vin's smile disappeared entirely. With all due respect, Sunny, you weren't on those sets. And with all due respect, she replied instantly, I've spent my career analyzing facts. Patterns matter. The tension was no longer subtle. It was visible, tangible. Sarah tried to lighten it. I think what Sunny's asking is. Vin cut in, his voice louder now. No, I understand what she's asking. The audience went still. His eyes locked onto Sunnis. You're suggesting that my silence equals guilt. Sunny held his gaze. I'm suggesting that influence comes with responsibility. A wave of murmurs spread again. For a split second, Vin looked away, toward the crowd, toward the bright lights, anywhere but at the table. Inside, something was brewing. Years of headlines. Years of speculation. Years of being portrayed as either the hero or the villain. He turned back sharply. You want responsibility, he said, louder now. I've carried billion-dollar franchises on my back. I've created opportunities for hundreds of people. I've built something that brings families together worldwide. That's responsibility. The applause was scattered, uncertain. Sunny didn't clap. She didn't flinch. And when co-workers publicly expressed discomfort, she pressed. Is that bringing people together? The temperature in the room spiked. Whoopi's voice cut in, firmer this time. Okay, let's take a breath. But Vin's restraint was cracking. I won't sit here, he said, his voice echoing across the studio, and let you frame me as some kind of villain based on selective narratives. Sunny's tone sharpened for the first time. No one used the word villain. You implied it. I asked a question. You made an accusation. The audience gasped at the volume now. Vin wasn't shouting yet, but he was close. His baritone carried force, reverberating through the microphones. Joy leaned back, whispering under her breath, "This is getting loud." Sunny leaned in, matching his posture. "I'm not here to flatter you. I'm here to ask what viewers are asking." Vin's hands clenched on the table. Viewers also ask why successful men are always the target of these narratives. That line hit like a match to gasoline. Sunny's eyebrows shot up. This isn't about gender. It's about behavior. It's always framed that way, Vin shot back. The audience was divided now, some clapping, some murmuring in disapproval. Whoopi stood slightly from her chair. All right. Let's reset." But resetting was no longer an option. Vin's voice rose, fully loud now, reverberating off the studio walls. "I work harder than anyone in this industry. I protect my team. I protect my name. And I won't let it be dragged for ratings." Sunny's composure cracked just enough to reveal irritation. No one needs ratings that badly. The room froze. There it was, the point of no return. Vin exhaled sharply through his nose, eyes blazing. For a second, it looked like he might stand up. Instead, he stayed seated, but the silence that followed felt even heavier than shouting. The audience didn't know whether to clap, gasp, or hold their breath. And somewhere in the control room, a producer likely realized this wasn't just another celebrity interview. It was turning into something far louder. Something no one could take back. And the cameras kept rolling. The silence didn't break gently. It shattered. For 3 long seconds after Sunny's last remark, the studio felt suspended in glass. Vin's chest rose and fell slowly, but his eyes were anything but calm. The polished table between them suddenly looked less like a talk show prop and more like a dividing line. Whoopi cleared her throat. "We're all passionate people here," she said carefully, trying to steady the room. "Let's not turn this into something it doesn't have to be." But it already had. Vin leaned back in his chair, forcing a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I didn't come here for a courtroom," he said, voice still edged. "I came here to talk about a film that celebrates unity." Sunny didn't retreat. "And part of unity," she replied evenly, "is addressing conflict honestly." A ripple of applause came from a small section of the audience. Another section stayed silent. Vin looked toward the crowd, shaking his head slightly. "See, this is what happens. Someone says conflict, and suddenly it becomes a narrative." Joy chimed in, attempting humor. "Well, to be fair, narratives are kind of our thing." A few nervous laughs surfaced. They evaporated quickly. Sunny folded her hands again, posture straight as steel. When multiple co-stars publicly discuss tension on set, that's not just narrative. That's testimony. The word testimony landed heavily. Vin's eyebrows furrowed. "Testimony," he repeated, incredulous. "You're comparing entertainment journalism to sworn statements." "I'm comparing public patterns to accountability," she shot back. The audience reacted audibly now, gasps mixing with murmurs. Saya stepped in gently. "Maybe we can pivot to how you handle disagreements professionally." "I handle them privately," Vin interrupted, his voice rising again. "Like adults." Sunny's lips pressed into a thin line. "But when those disagreements spill into the public sphere, privacy isn't the only factor anymore." Vin's patience visibly thinned. His fingers tapped once against the table, a sharp, rhythmic sound picked up by the microphones. "You keep implying I've done something wrong," he said. "Say it plainly if that's what you believe." The challenge hung in the air. Sunny didn't blink. "I believe powerful people should answer hard questions." "And I believe," Vin fired back, louder now, "that hard work shouldn't be twisted into suspicion." The crowd erupted into mixed applause and scattered boos. Producers gestured frantically off camera, signaling for a commercial break, but Whoopi held up her hand slightly, choosing to let it breathe. Inside Vin's mind, years of interviews flashed like camera bulbs. Smiles, deflections, controlled responses. He had always maintained composure, always chosen restraint. But something about the phrasing, about being dissected on live television, felt different today. "You don't know what it takes to lead a franchise," he said, voice intense but steadier now. "The pressure, the responsibility, the egos involved. I've been the one holding it together." Sunny's response was immediate. Leadership also means listening when someone says they felt unheard. There it was again, that subtle implication. Vin's jaw tightened. You're taking isolated interviews and building a case. I'm asking about them, she corrected. On national television. That's the platform we're on. Joy leaned toward Whoopi and whispered something inaudible. Whoopi exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples before stepping back in. Vin, Sunny, Whoopi said firmly, her tone carrying authority. This is a conversation, not a verdict. Vin nodded once, but the nod felt forced. Then let's have a real conversation. Sunny gestured toward him. Please. He leaned forward again, but this time his voice dropped, lower, more deliberate. There's a difference between conflict and controversy. Every set has disagreements. Every creative project has tension. That doesn't equal misconduct. Sunny held steady. No one said misconduct. You're circling it. I'm clarifying it. The back and forth was no longer just heated. It was rhythmic, like a verbal sparring match neither intended to lose. A woman in the audience shouted, "Let him speak." Another voice countered, "Answer the question." The studio floor manager motioned for quiet. Vin glanced toward the audience, then back at Sunny. You know what's interesting, he said. When women speak about being strong, it's empowerment. When men defend themselves, it's aggression. The temperature dropped. Sunny's expression hardened. Defensiveness isn't gendered. It's behavioral. A few audience members clapped loudly at that. Vin's voice rose again, unmistakably loud now. So now I'm defensive. You're raising your voice, she replied calmly. Because I'm being accused. Of what? The question sliced through the air. Vin paused. For the first time, there was hesitation. Not weakness, but calculation. Of being something I'm not, he finally said. Sunny softened slightly, but only slightly. Then help us understand who you are. It was an unexpected pivot. The intensity didn't vanish, but it shifted. Less confrontation. More challenge. Vin exhaled through his nose again, shoulders squared. I'm someone who built something from nothing, he said. I'm someone who fights for his team behind closed doors. I don't parade conflict for applause. Sunny's eyes searched his face. And do you think anyone felt silenced behind those closed doors? The question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The studio quieted again. Vin's hands opened slightly, palms pressing against the table. No one has ever been silenced by me. Sunny's gaze didn't waver. That's your perspective. And what's yours? He demanded. My perspective, she said steadily, is that influence is powerful. And when people speak up, it's worth listening instead of dismissing. Vin shook his head slowly. Listening doesn't mean agreeing with every accusation. True, she said. But volume doesn't replace clarity. The subtle jab didn't go unnoticed. The audience reacted with a mix of nervous laughter and sharp inhalations. Vin leaned back abruptly, the chair legs scraping faintly against the floor. So now I'm unclear too. Sunny remained composed. I'm asking for transparency. And I'm telling you, Vin said, voice echoing once more, there's nothing to be transparent about. The cameras zoomed in on both faces, intensity mirrored back at itself. For a split second, it looked like the conversation might collapse entirely. That someone would stand. That someone would walk off. Instead, Whoopi finally made the executive call. We're going to take a quick break, she announced firmly, her voice cutting through the tension like a gavel. The audience exhaled collectively as theme music swelled awkwardly. But even as the cameras faded to commercial, Vin and Sunny didn't look away from each other. The argument hadn't ended. It had only paused. And backstage, producers were already bracing for what might happen when the show returned live. The second the cameras cut to commercial, the applause sign flickered off, but the tension didn't. Vin pushed back from the table slightly, rolling his shoulders as if trying to physically shake off the heat. A production assistant hurried toward the stage, whispering urgently to Whoopi. Sunny remained seated, posture upright, her jaw set but controlled. She reached for her mug, took a slow sip, and kept her eyes forward. Joy leaned toward her. That escalated fast, she muttered. Sunny replied quietly. He escalated it. Across the table, Vin heard it. His head turned sharply. No, he said, voice still carrying despite the muted microphones. You escalated it when you framed the question like a prosecution. A stage manager stepped in gently. Guys, we're back in 90 seconds. Whoopi raised both hands. Everybody breathe. We're not doing this during commercial. Vin stood up. The movement alone shifted the energy. He didn't tower aggressively, but his presence filled the space in a way that was impossible to ignore. Audience members in the front rows exchanged glances. Some lifted their phones instinctively, though staff quickly signaled for them to put them down. Sunny finally rose too, not dramatically, but deliberately. She wasn't about to have this conversation from a lower physical position. You don't get to raise your voice at me and then accuse me of escalation, she said firmly. I don't get to defend myself. Vin countered. You do. But don't confuse volume with strength. The words hit harder off-air than they had on it. Vin took a step closer to the table, palms flat against it again. You're dissecting years of work into sound bites. And you're dismissing legitimate concerns as gossip, she replied. A producer hurried in. We need both of you seated. Now. 30 seconds. Whoopi stepped between their sightlines, not physically blocking, but enough to redirect. We're not turning this into a headline we can't control, she said, low and stern. If you have something to say it when we live. Calmly. Vin exhaled sharply, dragging a hand over his shaved head. For a moment, the anger looked less like fury and more like frustration, deep, personal frustration. Sunny adjusted her blazer and sat back down first. That small action didn't go unnoticed. Vin followed, lowering himself into his chair just as the countdown began. 5, 4, 3. The red light blinked on. The applause sign lit up again, but the clapping this time was uncertain, fractured. Whoopi leaned forward, reclaiming control. Welcome back, she said smoothly, though her eyes betrayed the effort. We're having a passionate conversation this morning. Joy nodded. Very passionate. Vin sat straighter now, his voice controlled but still intense. I want to clarify something. Sunny folded her hands. Please do. He looked directly into the main camera instead of at her. A calculated move. I have never silenced anyone. I've never intimidated anyone. If there were disagreements, they were handled professionally. The idea that leadership equals wrongdoing is unfair. A portion of the audience applauded firmly this time. Sunny waited until the clapping faded. No one said leadership equals wrongdoing, she said calmly. But leadership does mean people may feel uncomfortable challenging you. Vin turned back toward her. So now I'm unapproachable. I'm saying power dynamics are real. His voice rose again, less explosive, but unmistakably loud. Power dynamics exist everywhere. On this panel too. The air shifted instantly. Joy's eyes widened. Sarah blinked. Whoopi tilted her head slowly. Sunny didn't flinch. Are you suggesting I'm misusing power? I'm suggesting, Vin said, gesturing toward the table, that questioning someone's integrity on national television carries its own weight. Sunny leaned in slightly. And so does avoiding questions. The audience gasped again. The rhythm had returned. Sharp, precise, escalating. Vin's hand sliced lightly through the air as he spoke. You want me to answer for every rumor that trends online. That's not accountability. That's feeding a machine. It's not about rumors, Sunny insisted. It's about patterns people have openly discussed. And I've addressed them privately. But publicly, it looks like silence. Vin's restraint cracked again. Because not everything deserves a press conference, he said loudly, his voice booming through the studio. The sound reverberated. A baby somewhere in the back let out a startled cry. The audience collectively inhaled. Whoopi leaned forward. Okay, let's lower it down. Vin didn't immediately comply. His chest rose heavily, eyes locked on Sunny. Sunny's voice, in contrast, remained steady, but sharper now. Raising your voice right now is exactly why some people might hesitate to confront you. That line landed like a thunderclap. Vin froze. For a split second, the entire studio felt like it had been vacuum sealed. His expression shifted, not rage, but something more complicated. Recognition, realization, or disbelief. You think I'm intimidating, he said, quieter but still intense. I think you're powerful, she replied. And power can feel intimidating, even unintentionally. The shift in tone was subtle but profound. Vin leaned back slowly this time, hands no longer clenched. You know what's frustrating, he said. I've spent decades building an image of family, of loyalty, of unity. And one narrative can try to tear it down. Sunny's eyes softened slightly. Then help us understand it better. The audience grew still again, but now the stillness wasn't explosive. It was anticipatory. Vin hesitated. For the first time since the clash began, his voice dropped below intensity into something more reflective. You don't survive in this industry by being careless, he said. You survive by being disciplined, focused, protective. That can look cold from the outside. Sunny nodded slowly. It can. Joy interjected gently. So maybe what we're really talking about is perception versus intention. Vin glanced at Joy, then back at Sunny. Maybe. Sunny held his gaze. Intent matters, but impact matters too. The sentence hung between them. Impact. Vin's jaw flexed once more, but he didn't raise his voice this time. I don't control how every action is interpreted. No, Sunny agreed. But you can control how you respond when someone says they were hurt. The audience murmured, quieter, thoughtful. Vin inhaled deeply, then exhaled slowly. If anyone felt unheard, he said carefully, that was never my intention. It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't defiance either. Sunny nodded once. That's a start. The tension didn't vanish, but it transformed. From a shouting match into something more layered. More dangerous, in a way, because now it was emotional rather than explosive. Whoopi sensed the shift and leaned in. Conversations like this are uncomfortable, she said. But sometimes discomfort is where growth happens. Vin gave a tight nod. Sunny's posture relaxed just slightly. But the audience? They were split. Some clapped in support of the dialogue. Others remained skeptical, whispering among themselves. And as the segment clock ticked down, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a loud clash anymore. It was becoming a defining moment. One that would echo far beyond the studio walls. The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was uneven. Some people clapped cautiously, others folded their arms, watching like jurors who hadn't reached a verdict. Vin sat still, shoulders squared but no longer rigid. Sunny adjusted the papers in front of her, though she hadn't looked down at them once. The air had shifted from explosive to electric, quieter, but more charged. Whoopi sensed the delicate balance. We're talking about perception, intention, impact, she said, voice steady. Those are big words. But at the end of the day, this is about people. Vin nodded slowly. It always has been for me. Sunny tilted her head. Then let's talk about people. There it was again, the subtle challenge. Vin met her gaze. Okay. You've described yourself as protective, she continued. Disciplined. Focused. Those traits can build empires. But they can also create walls. Do you think you've ever built walls so high that others couldn't reach you? The question wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Vin's expression tightened, but not with anger this time. With thought. I don't build walls, he said. I build boundaries. Sunny didn't miss a beat. And how do people experience those boundaries? The audience murmured softly. Vin leaned forward again, but his tone remained controlled. Boundaries are necessary, especially in an industry that feeds on chaos. If I don't protect my space, my team, my vision, someone else will try to control it. Sunny nodded once. Protection can be admirable, but sometimes protection can look like control. The word control lingered. Vin's eyes narrowed slightly, not in fury, but in resistance. You keep framing this as if I dominate everyone around me. I'm asking whether anyone might feel dominated, she replied calmly. Joy jumped in, her voice lighter but still probing. Let's be honest, sets are high-pressure environments. Tempers flare. Creative differences happen. Is it possible some of those moments felt bigger to others than they did to you? Vin paused. For the first time since the clash began, he didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched long enough for the audience to lean forward collectively. Maybe, he said finally, the word almost reluctant. Maybe there were moments where my intensity was misunderstood. Sunny's gaze softened, but she didn't let go. Or maybe not misunderstood. The tension ticked upward again, but this time it wasn't explosive. It was intimate. Vin's voice lowered. I give everything to what I build. Everything. If that passion comes off as intensity, I won't apologize for caring. No one's asking you to apologize for caring, Sunny said. But when someone says they felt unheard or uncomfortable, that's not an attack. That's feedback. The audience clapped lightly at that. Vin exhaled, looking briefly toward the ceiling lights. Feedback, he repeated. Sarah leaned in gently. Feedback doesn't erase success. It refines it. Vin looked back at the table. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glossy surface, Broad shoulders, stern eyes, the weight of a global brand resting visibly on him. "You know what's hard," he said quietly. "When you've spent years being told you're the backbone, the anchor, the one holding it together, and then suddenly, you're painted as the problem." Sunny responded without hesitation. Sometimes anchors hold ships steady. Sometimes they keep them from moving. A collective woe rolled through the audience. Even Whoopi blinked at that one. Vin didn't raise his voice this time. Instead, he leaned closer, his presence intense but measured. "Are you saying I've held people back?" "I'm saying power requires constant reflection," Sunny answered. "Especially when others speak up." The cameras zoomed in tight. Two strong personalities locked in a debate that had outgrown simple promotion. Joy shifted in her chair. "This is deeper than a movie press tour." "That's because it is," Sunny said quietly. Vin studied her for a moment, as if trying to decide whether this was confrontation or invitation. "You were a prosecutor," he said finally. "You're trained to find fault. And you're trained to defend your image," she countered. The audience gasped softly again. Vin's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Touché." For the first time, a small ripple of genuine laughter moved through the room. But it didn't dissolve the tension. It only thinned it. Sunny leaned back slightly. "I'm not your enemy, Vin." "Feels like it," he replied bluntly. Her voice softened, just a fraction. "I'm not." The vulnerability in that exchange caught even Joy off guard. Whoopi leaned forward, sensing the pivot. Maybe what's happening here is two strong people who are used to leading. Vin looked at Whoopi, then back at Sunny. "Leadership gets lonely," he admitted quietly. The admission hung heavy. Sunny's posture shifted, less confrontational now, more contemplative. "It does," she agreed. "But it doesn't have to be isolating." Vin swallowed hard, the movement visible on camera. "When you're at the top of something," he said, voice steady but thick with restrained emotion, "every decision is magnified. Every disagreement becomes a headline. So yes, sometimes you close ranks. Sometimes you protect more than you should." The audience was silent. Sunny nodded slowly. "That's human." Vin's eyes flickered briefly toward the crowd, then back to her. "But I won't accept being framed as some tyrant because I care deeply about what I built." Sunny met his gaze evenly. "Then don't be one." The line wasn't shouted. It wasn't sarcastic. It was simple, direct, and it landed with the weight of a challenge. Vin's jaw tightened again, but this time, he didn't fire back. Instead, he sat with it. For several seconds, the studio was completely still. Finally, he spoke. "I'm not perfect," he said, voice low. "But I'm not the villain of this story either." Sunny nodded once. "No one is saying you are." The audience began to clap, slowly at first, then stronger. The clash had transformed again. Not into resolution, but into something more complex. Something that felt less like an argument, and more like a reckoning. And as the segment clock ticked dangerously close to its end, everyone in that studio knew. The aftermath was going to be louder than the confrontation itself. The applause swelled, but it wasn't celebratory. It was reflective, like an audience unsure whether they had just witnessed conflict or clarity. Whoopi glanced toward the stage manager, who was subtly signaling that they were seconds from wrapping the segment. The red light on the main camera blinked steadily, capturing every micro-expression, every breath, every flicker of tension that still lingered between Vin Diesel and Sunny Hostin. Vin sat upright, shoulders squared but no longer combative. The fire in his eyes had dimmed into something steadier, still strong, but measured. Sunny's posture had softened too. Not defeated. Not victorious. Just present. Whoopi leaned in for the close. "Conversations like this aren't easy," she said. "But sometimes they are necessary." Joy nodded. "And they are definitely memorable." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the audience. Vin looked toward Sunny one last time before turning to the camera. "I came here to talk about a film," he said evenly. "But maybe this was the conversation that needed to happen." Sunny met his glance. "Growth doesn't happen in comfort." The audience clapped again, stronger now. Vin extended his hand across the table. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't forced. It was deliberate. Sunny paused only a fraction of a second before taking it. The handshake wasn't long, but it was firm. And in that brief contact, the studio exhaled. The segment ended. The theme music rose. The cameras panned wide. But the story didn't stop there. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, clips were already circulating online. Short, Sharp edits of raised voices. Of Sunny saying, "Volume doesn't replace clarity." Of Vin booming, "I won't let my name be dragged for ratings." Hashtags began climbing. #Vin on The View. #Sunny vs Vin. #Live TV Clash. Social media split down the middle. One side praised Sunny for holding a powerful celebrity accountable on live television. "That's journalism," one viral post read. "Ask the hard questions." The other side defended Vin fiercely. "He was ambushed," another trending comment declared. "He came to promote a movie, not stand trial." Entertainment blogs framed it as a showdown. Headlines used words like explosive, fiery, heated exchange. Some outlets dissected body language frame by frame, analyzing when Vin's jaw tightened, when Sunny leaned forward, when Whoopi intervened. Clips of the loudest moments racked up millions of views within hours. But what fascinated viewers most wasn't the shouting. It was the shift. The moment when anger gave way to something more vulnerable. When Vin admitted leadership could be lonely. When Sunny acknowledged power without labeling him a villain. That gray area, that human complexity, sparked deeper debate. Radio hosts argued about it during their afternoon segments. Podcast panels replayed the confrontation in slow motion. Comment sections became battlegrounds of opinion. Some viewers said Vin revealed exactly why people might feel intimidated around him. Others insisted he had every right to defend himself passionately. By evening, even other celebrities were subtly weighing in. Cryptic posts about accountability, about media narratives, about strength under scrutiny. Inside the View studio, long after the audience had left, producers were still debriefing. It had been tense, risky, unpredictable, but it had also been real. Sunny left the building composed, fielding questions with short, careful answers. "It was a conversation," she said simply. "And conversations matter." Vin exited through a separate door, surrounded by his team. When asked for comment, he paused briefly and said, "I stand by what I said." No anger, no apology, just conviction. And that conviction fueled the debate even more. Because moments like this don't fade quietly. They echo. They replay in living rooms and on phones at midnight. They linger in group chats. They turn into think pieces and reaction videos. They make viewers question not just what was said, but how it was said. Was it a clash? Or was it accountability meeting ego in real time? Was it confrontation? Or growth unfolding under bright studio lights? The truth depends on who's watching. Back on the set, hours later, the chairs still sat in their positions around the polished table. The lights were dimmed now. Silent. The space that had crackled with energy was calm again. But the impact remained. Because sometimes the loudest moments aren't about who wins. They are about who listens. And whether listening is enough. Now we want to hear from you. Was Sunny right to press the questions on live television? Or did Vin have every right to defend himself loudly and unapologetically? Did this moment reveal strength or insecurity? Accountability or ambush? Drop your opinion in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you want more explosive, emotional, behind-the-scenes breakdowns of the biggest celebrity clashes and live TV moments,